So the COVID lockdown has really impacted wineries hard. I mean, they've had several months where they couldn't even have any traffic or visitors to their tasting rooms, so sales went down. Their restaurant clients have been closed for quite a while, not even back at full capacity. So how are they coping? What strategies are they using? Um, we're going to talk today about how you can support these local grassroots businesses, because I believe there's never been a better time to drink wine and feel really good about it. So we're going to be chatting with someone who has been at the heart of this issue in wine country on Niagara-on-the-Lake. Andrea Kaiser grew up in Niagara-on-the-Lake. Her father is the legendary Carl Kaiser, who was co-founder and winemaker at Enniskillen Wines. He really fueled the revolution of winemaking in Ontario and arguably in Canada. Now, Andrea has created her own illustrious career in wine. She's the director of marketing for Rife Winery in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And also she co-founded her own wine label, Drea's Wine Company. And that's where she makes wines in loving memory of her father, because her father called her Drea. She's also the chair of the Wineries of Niagara-on-the-Lake, the Wineries of the Niagara-on-the-Lakes Association. And she joins me now live from Niagara-on-the-Lake. Hello, Andrea.
Hi, Natalie. Thank you so much for the lovely introduction, and thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. We all want to hear from you and what you and the other folks in the Niagara-on-the-Lake are experiencing right now. But before we dive into that, I would love to hear the story about your first ice wine harvest, especially since your father is just so legendary and associated with it.
Of course, of course. So, him and his partner, Donald Giraldo, were well known for their iconic ice wines and winning the Grand Prix d'Honneur in France with the 1989 vintage, which there's a couple of bottles still in the basement.
Really?
We'll have to find a special occasion to open those up. So in the early days, ice wine was all by hand. And it's interesting because it is partly mechanical now. There's, it's pretty cold out there. So looking for creative ways to not have to hand pick, but in the very early days, it was all hand picked. And so I was very excited to be part of the ice wine harvest. My first time, I was perhaps a teenager at the time, 15, 16. And I must admit, sadly, that I only lasted about 2.5 hours.
Oh, really? Really?
It was so cold. So I created a new job for myself on the ice wine harvest. The annual tradition was that I would make chili for all of the ice wine harvesters.
You are so smart. We're kind of soul sisters in that when everybody goes skiing, they all go out in the slopes. I get the drinks ready back at the chalet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's fine. Not a big fan of cold. The great indoors is terrific.
Exactly. So that was my big contribution each year, as I would stay in the boutique and make a nice big pot of chili, keep the coffee going, help with the payments at the end of the shift. So
it's really cold out there, isn't it? There's often the harvest is
really
at midnight, colder than -8 degrees Celsius. I mean,
yes. Yeah, and I recall, interestingly, because, when you talk about temperatures, -8, -10, I remember one year my dad just coming home in the morning and saying, we had to stop. It got too cold. I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, the grapes are like marbles. I can't get anything out of them. So he went to bed for a few hours, woke up in the morning when the sun started to rise, and slowly the grapes started to melt a tiny bit so that he could even get the extracted juice out of these marble hard grapes. Because once you get past -16, there's just nothing that comes out of the grapes. So
wow.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to your father in person at Enniskillen. It was one of the most memorable interviews I ever had, Andrea. Mm-hmm. And he talked about those ice marbles and the fact that one harvest, I forget which one it was, that it broke the wine press. They were so hard.
Oh, yes.
It actually broke the press.
Probably that same year when he came home and said, we've got to go back in the morning. We just can't do anything with these grapes. So yeah, it was, of course, a learning experience for him as a winemaker from the very beginning. I don't know if you've ever seen, there's an old CBC video in the archives that shows one of the first harvests they had, and just to see the technologies they were using, the tractors, the whole, you know, everything. And it was such a learning curve for both the table wines and the ice wine, right? So it was a really interesting time.
Wow. And then there was one other story I wanted to hear, and you were driving down Concession 1 Road. How old were you and what was happening? What time
You
of
know, I
year
was a
was it?
little older at that time, and this was after he had done a lot of work on VQA. So VQA was a vision that both him and Donald shared. It was really born out of the original idea of exporting our wines. So
oh, and let's just define that for somebody who might not know.
Of course.
Vintners Quality Alliance, VQA?
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Great.
So VQA does two things. One of the most critical aspects of it, though, is it guarantees a place of origin, also quality seal. But I think the origin, especially in these times, is even more important to consider, that this, you know, guarantees for consumers that they are 100%, you know, 100% locally grown wine. So all the fruit comes from Ontario if you see a VQA. And that's really, we'll talk more about that in terms of supporting the local industry when we talk about COVID. But in understanding, like, you know, in my early 20s, just the idea of sub-appellations, I had done some wine studies and understood that, you know, in Italy, they have the DOC, they have the AOC in France. And it is an overwhelming and confusing topic. And people try to understand this French word, terroir, an appellation, like, what does that mean? Yeah. And for me, this story really defined it. We were driving down Concession 1, and I went, oh, Papa, look at these vines. I can't even believe it. So we were heading south towards the falls, and on the right-hand side, all the vines were starting to brown and to, you know, obviously they're not that producing anymore. And on the left, they were still green, the leaves. And I said, I can't, that's like unbelievable. And he said, oh yeah, he goes, well, you know, think about it, appellations, sub-appellations, really that's just a place. And he had done a lot of work on mapping the different regions and grape growing areas in Ontario, and just to see that difference of that spot 1 kilometer from the river, of where the flows of the air no longer continued past, and it would just happen to be along Concession 1 that
wow, so it was just the distance of a road, like on one side, it was so dramatically different. That really does bring to light the, or really illustrates the whole idea of appellations, just how, you know, and they talk about in France just how a few meters can make the world of difference. You know, and I think of this analogy too sometimes when I'm trying to understand appellations. So the big appellation is like those resting Russian dolls, you know, one fits inside the next one. So they say the big appellation is Ontario. Within that, we could drill down to Niagara. Then we can drill down to Niagara-on-the-Lake. Then we can drill down to Niagara Lakeshore, you know, and then we drill down to vineyards. So it's like one little appellation, it nests within the larger ones. But that's a great story to illustrate that point, Andrea.
Yes, I'll never forget that, because it just defined it in my mind. So
absolutely, it's good visual. So do you have another memory, like your earliest memory of wine?
Oh, my earliest memory of wine. So there's some photos of me helping out in Austria, which I don't myself recall, but sort of have those memories of being in Austria at the time, where we were helping to wash bottles. And it's funny because my father was a chemist, a teacher, wanted to be a priest. So he had all these different sort of paths that he had. And it wasn't until he met my mom that he decided, okay, the priest no longer something I'm considering, fell in love. And it was her father that actually made wine at home. And so we had, you know, that very European culture. It was like a big family square in the middle, washing the bottles. You know, they used the space for everything from making sausages to head cheese to making wine. And so that was sort of a family trip we had taken way back when I was quite young. And then, of course, the Enniskillen days. You know, actually, one of the biggest memories I have, obviously, is of harvest, because it's always an exciting time. And just visualizing at the time those big trucks rolling in with the grapes into the weigh station, the refractometer coming out. Which,
what's that? The refract? Yes, please.
It's for measuring the sugar of the grapes.
Right.
So what they do is they squeeze a little bit of juice on it, look up in the sun, and then it gives them a reading. And the sugar content is really an indicator of ripeness.
Uh-huh.
So that's also then an indicator of the quality. So having my dad talk about the bricks, which is the sugar level that, you know, you measure in. And it's really funny when I do talk about, you know, different things with friends who are interested to learn, and they're like, how do you know all this stuff? I was like, we talked about it at
Right.
dinner all the time.
It's like osmosis growing up in it. It's like you grew up in a barrel rather than a, I don't know, a cradle or whatever. You were
Part
born in
of,
a barrel.
yeah.
That's so great.
Yeah.
What do you think the wisest advice your father ever gave you about wine or life, or maybe they're intertwined? What what do you
Yeah,
remember
I think,
most?
you know, if I mean, you said you met my dad, and I think what really
Mhm.
resonated with people was that he was the most genuine, authentic person you could meet, and sort of, you know, just in life, obviously, that taught me a lot about being myself and being comfortable with who I am. But he also felt like that in terms of when he talked about his wines. He did not have a lot of airs about him, which is interesting because wine obviously has this sort of mysterious air about it that makes people feel very intimidated. And he never, ever wanted to make anyone feel intimidated. He loved sharing information. He loved helping people digest it in a way they could understand, because he wanted them to enjoy his wines. Like that was like his like he loved to share. It's like when you cook for someone, a chef cooks, and
Right.
he was a winemaker, and do you like it? Like he always worried about you liking it. And that was what was really neat. And he really brought wine down to a level for everyone. He traditionally was at the kitchen table with a big jar of olives, with a big scoop, slotted spoon, to just grab those olives out of the jar, and beside had his glass of wine in a water glass. I mean, there
Ha.
was no, you know, it was that very much, it's part of lifestyle. It's a food. It's something you enjoy with a meal. You don't have to feel intimidated by it. And really the key fact was that you should drink what you like, not what
Mhm.
someone tells you should drink. And that, you know, it's okay to say, I like this or I don't like this, and don't feel, you know, he just wanted to inspire confidence in people to
That's
really
awesome.
enjoy wine.
Wow, that's so great. I can visualize him there with the big jar of olives.
Oh, yeah.
It's great, great picture. He's right behind you, is he not?
Yes, he
He's still
is. He
got your
still
back
looks
there. Yeah, there he
so
is.
he does.
That's great, Andrea. Awesome. All right, so let's jump forward to 2020. How is the harvest this year going? How is it out in the fields? What's happening? What's impacted it spring through summer? That sort of thing.
Sure. You know what, 2020 has been a really exceptionally good year. Grapes traditionally like very dry season. So no, you know, obviously a little bit of rain. We had to do a little bit of irrigation in the summer because, as you recall, it was a super hot summer, very dry, which is very ideal for grape growing, because what we want is we want the grapes to dig really deep, and for those vines to get deeper and deeper into those nutrients and soils. And then what we hope for, obviously, is that continues on. And Indian summer is always an exceptional, you know, we're having a little bit of that now. I'm looking out my window and seeing the sunshine, and the breeze is actually really great as well. Just keeping that airflow pattern
Hmm.
moving through the
What does
vineyard.
that prevent? What does, if there's
So
good
that
airflow?
prevents, yes, that prevents any kind of impacts to the grapes that it might, it keeps it clean essentially from any
Okay.
kind of effect of yeast or rot. So because it just keeps it very, very clean
And
and
dry,
very good.
like prevents mold
Exactly.
or
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Yes. Sorry, that was
Cool.
the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
So that's exceptional for the harvest. And it's, with it being so hot, I often get asked at, you know, at the winery, what's the best vintage and what's, you know, what makes a great vintage. Of course, there are exceptional years, but we also want to keep in mind that there are certain wines that do better in certain vintages. So
Mm-hmm.
I always like to find a wine, like I always say, you know, 2019 was an exceptional vintage for whites and sparkling, because it was a little cooler. So you get that higher acidity, a little lower sugar. So that's going to create those nice food-friendly wines with bright acidity. Whereas this year is a little hotter and more extended. So we're going to see a really great vintage for reds. So we're going to see the reds be a little fuller bodied, higher sugar content, which is the natural sugars that then increase the alcohols when you're fermenting. So really, there's always a great story for every vintage. It's
Right.
just really looking at what, you know, personality kind of that vintage and what styles are going to show best.
Terrific. That's good to know. Like, yeah, the 2020 for reds, 2019 for whites and sparklings. That's great. So before we get right into the Niagara-on-the-Lake, for those, harvest time is a time when a lot of people like to visit wine country. Of course, COVID has affected everything. Is it still a good time to visit right now? Are the wineries open? What's happening?
It's a great question, and we get lots of phone calls. And essentially, this summer was almost like honestly creating a new business. It was going from no tastings to tasting bar being opened, and even in the no tasting points, sort of modifying our online sales processes due to increased volume and figuring things out. So it's been an exciting year. I learned a lot and learned some really interesting things, and found a way to really reinvent ourselves.
What have you learned most? Like what have been a couple of those key learnings that you've really
Yeah, I think
learned?
the idea of reservations, and that's when you asked about what's and how to visit. You know, the evolution of the industry from popping in for a tasting and trying to figure out how you make your way up through the bar with 30 people and having to go through those crowds. I mean, the crowds are not here, but yet we're still seeing customers who are coming in for a safe and reserved experience. And so it's giving us time to really spend with our customers.
Oh, wow. So it's more like a restaurant experience, like you make a
Yeah,
reservation, you plan your
exactly.
trip. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So you get your designated spot. It's booked for 45 minutes, and you get to, you've got that space. You don't have to worry. There's, you've got time to chat with your wine consultant. They're going to help you with your purchases from start to finish, because we want to keep everybody compartmentalized in terms of their social distancing. So you're getting that really amazing one-on-one experience that you wouldn't have normally got in a sort of a busy season. So
that's true, Andrea,
really
because I remember pulling up to parking lots in wineries around the world, and it's like, if there's a big tour bus, I'm leaving. I'm not even going in there. It's like, forget
why
it.
we always park our buses at the back. We know.
Ooh, good strategy.
But yeah, certainly we're not seeing bus business this year. But yeah, it is. It's overwhelming, right? And
right.
people often feel nervous in the first place. They've maybe never been to a winery before. They don't know how it works. So the reservation really sort of prepares them for the experience, what the expectations are, and they're going to get that tasting that's going to really uncover what their wine desires are, what they enjoy, and that's what's really been really, really interesting and amazing about the season.
Awesome. And I've seen various pictures of various wineries. They've got like plastic shields up the way a lot of our grocery stores do, and everybody's wearing masks. I mean, what other precautions have been taken? There's reservations. They're limiting the number of people in the wineries. Anything else that they're doing along those lines?
Yeah, so we do contact tracing, so that's really important. We obviously also, when our team members come in, we make sure and we do a health check with them. They're all, of course, wearing personal protective equipment. We have high level of cleaning processes in place, leaving time even within reservations to clean the tasting pods and disinfect. So lots of new processes as far as that is concerned. And of course, we have a bylaw in Niagara-on-the-Lake, for example, that does require you to wear a mask. So everyone's wearing a mask both on site until they're seated. So once you're and that's the other part of it. So that's helped to, we don't have people walking around doing tastings anymore other than outside. We have them seated at a table or at the bar, so that it really minimizes that and creates those social distancing spaces. And then a lot of wineries have, of course, utilized through the season the outdoor experiences. A lot of us had event spaces that we no longer were using. So we created a reservation, much like you said, with a restaurant experience where you could book a table to have a glass of wine, have some cheese and charcuterie, and again, everything very socially distanced.
Right. And I presume into the fall, you've got tents and heaters to extend the season.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. In fact, we were just setting up for our Christmas market, and I noticed that Peller just posted about their new winter market. So we're all getting creative about what can we do in winter as Canadians. And so we're setting up some beautiful barrel chairs, little heaters. We're going to have like chimney cakes and Bavarian almonds, and just really, sort of have a little bit of Christmas music, holiday music playing. And you can book that barrel chair for an hour to come in and enjoy the treats. And we'll do mulled wine, some blue wine, as it's known in Germany, and some ice wine cider. So we'll kind of spice
Fabulous.
things up for, yeah.
Oh, that sounds
Yeah.
really festive. And so during this period, how did you pivot, so to speak, to online
Yeah.
sales? I mean, I'm assuming that they really grew. Like, can you give us an order of magnitude? Like, how important did
Sure.
they become? What did you do to take advantage of it, you and the other wineries?
Yeah, that it was such a critical aspect of our business in the early days with COVID, obviously with the shutdown when the tasting rooms were closed. Obviously, a very fearful time for so many businesses. We were very fortunate as compared to, let's say, restaurants, where as an alcohol beverage manufacturer, we were deemed an essential service like the LCBO. So while we couldn't do tastings, we had our store open. We were doing a lot of curbside pickups. So for locals, big lineups at the LCBO. For those people who were close to a winery, they could just call ahead, order their wine, pick it out front. So that was very popular for a number of months. And then, of course, the online sales took us by surprise, but in a very good way. I mean, to see that support of people wanting to support local, order direct from the winery. So, I had been working from home for a little bit up until that point where sort of everything took off. And I had to come back into the winery to work from here with, we had Klaus doing deliveries, our accounting office doing deliveries, like everybody.
You mean your winemaker was doing deliveries, Klaus? Oh gosh.
Everyone, yes,
Pitch in fully.
Klaus. And all the wineries were functioning that way. Everyone was just pitching in, and it was so exciting though, because we were so scared and nervous, and here was this sort of community of wine drinkers coming together to support local. And it was I would say, like, for example, I might do 200 orders in a week traditionally, like, a fairly decent, but then, I think that one weekend we had our red, so we did like 2,000 orders.
Oh my gosh, all online.
So,
wow.
Yeah, so that was pretty substantial. I mean, it's reduced a little bit now that people are getting out now, but it's really exciting to see that people are realizing they can order direct from a winery and also get wines that aren't normally available. So that's something that, you can get some really great special wines that you won't see in the LCBO. So it's,
absolutely. And there again, you've got the restaurant experience, especially as people want to sort of elevate their home dining experience. Again, restaurants are unfortunately closed again right now as we speak. But even when they go back, a lot of people are still nervous of going out, so they can try these new wines the way they would go to a restaurant to try new wines and be guided that way.
Yeah. And you can often do like a mixed case of different wines from a winery, 6 bottles or 12. So
it's not a huge commitment.
No.
Do 6. Yeah. Cool. So you've got a new initiative, Taste the Season, which I just love, feeling festive already. And so tell us about what that involves. There's 24 Niagara-on-the-Lake wineries, right? And they're all participating in this. So what's involved?
So I'm currently chair of the wineries of Niagara-on-the-Lake, which is a marketing cooperative, and we work together to really tell the story of the Niagara-on-the-Lake appellation when we were talking about, that sort of overarching wine growing area. And every year we traditionally have our signature events, but in looking at our traditional model of Taste the Season and understanding the health impacts potentially of bringing like 3,000 people down to visit, just really didn't make sense for our team members, guests, or the community. So we created a virtual version of Taste the Season at home. To your point about, cooking and trying new recipes. So normally we offer a food pairing, but what we've done instead is we've included a recipe from a local chef in your wine shipment box. And then that recipe has wines paired in the box. Our box, for example, has 3 wines and 3 recipes. So you can do your food matching and pairing at home, have some great holiday wines and great recipes you may have not tried before. So those are all 6 packs that we've offered on our new website, which we're really excited to share as well.
Oh, absolutely. It's a gorgeous new website, but I love that idea of packaging the experience too, the wines with the recipes. And is there a cost for shipping, or is? How's
So
that
each
deal?
winery, I think most of them, it's a little different for each.
Okay.
Sometimes the shipping costs are included, but if you visit our Taste the Season at Home landing page on our website, wineries-of-Niagara-on-the-Lake.com, it has all the
All the
costs, and you can
details. Yeah.
choose from 24. It tells you the
Different
recipes
ones. Yeah.
included. So yeah, yeah.
Because it's been my experience, because I've been ordering directly from your region, and most of the time it's free. But as you say, it can
Yeah,
vary by
yeah,
winery, but it's so reasonable. I mean, the
yeah,
shipping isn't
yeah.
going very far anyway. So that's amazing. So so you've got this new website, and why would people want to visit it? What's new there that what resources can they find?
Yeah, so we've always had traditionally a lot of information about our members, obviously, in terms of their offerings. I think for visiting, it's a great resource to understand what the new COVID world of tasting looks like. So we've got some guidelines of what sort of best practices in coming to visit, you know, reserving ahead, planning your day, how many wineries to come to. And that's obviously new within the information that we share, but we also wanted to start to focus a little bit more on telling our story of the appellation, so of the wine growing region. So there's so many different, I mean, we were sort of the original wine region, and now there's so many different regions over time which have developed, which are all exceptional. But as you know, you said, each one is a little bit different, has its own wine personality. And so we really wanted to tell that story and share what's unique and different about Niagara-on-the-Lake and the wineries here. And that really relates to the grapes that we grow and the unique climatic conditions. So that is all housed on the new site. We have some amazing videos that tell the story of winemaking in Niagara-on-the-Lake. So it's a really great site.
That's awesome. So there are four within Niagara-on-the-Lake. So if we do back to my Russian doll,
Yep,
Ontario, Niagara-on-the-Lake. Within
yep,
Niagara-on-the-Lake, there are four sub-appellations.
yes.
So maybe you can just name those off, and one or two wines for each that they're sort
Sure.
of famous for.
Yeah, so there's the Lakeshore, which you would think of some iconic wineries that you might know, like Stroon and Consommé, who has actually one of the few vineyards that are right on the lake. So he has that. Herbert Farm would have that influence of the lake that really defines those lakeshore vineyards because of the proximity and the closeness of those warmer winds. And then as you come around the bend from the historic town, on the eastern side, you would have Niagara River, where we're located, with Inniskillen, with ourselves right estate, Laley down the road, Pellers just kind of off a little bit upwards. So that's the Niagara River sub-appellation, and that's really defined by the influences of the lake, but also the river even more so, and those currents that are coming off of the Niagara River. And then you move up around the edge perimeter towards St. David's. The St. David's Bench area, you would have iconic wineries like Chateau des Charmes, and then you have a newer winery, for example, like Queenston Mile, but that has had farm there for many, many years. And the bench is really nestled up against the escarpment. So that provides it some very protected, where you might see some varieties like Shiraz, much like you might see Shiraz in the Niagara River, because those warming factors, protective factors, provide for a little protection for some of the tender varietals.
Uh-huh.
And then you have the 4 Mile Creek area in the middle, which is the largest producing, I think perhaps even in Ontario, the largest producing sub-appellation, and you get some great, nice expanse of sunshine throughout the day. So you get really great development of the fruit because it's got that exposure kind of on a regular basis, nice airflow patterns happening in there as well. But the one thing that really defines, Niagara-on-the-Lake overall, obviously there's all the little pockets, but, we are in what's denoted as a specialty crop area.
Yes.
So, and this is protected by the province because of these unique climatic conditions that are really created by the escarpment, the river, the lake, and also the soils, which if you think about the escarpment, it used to be the lake shore of Lake Iroquois, and then over years it receded back to where Lake Ontario is now. So we've got all these amazing soils from the original lake bed of Lake Iroquois, which is essentially Niagara-on-the-Lake, and that's where all the vines are growing. So some great geological factors, and one of the warmest, so most protected, and that's why it's really denoted as specialty. We can grow tender fruits here, unlike a lot of areas in Ontario. And that
What do you
allows
mean
us
by
to,
tender fruit? Sorry.
so peaches, pears,
Oh, I see.
plums,
Okay.
yeah,
Gotcha.
sorry. And then
Yep.
grapes are tender fruit as well.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so that's one thing that kind of, obviously, we're well known for as like a fruit belt. And then because of these factors, we can also grow more tender varietals. So Merlot, Shiraz, Sauvignon Blanc, that may not do as well in other parts of Ontario, just because simply we're a little bit warmer and we have a little bit of a longer growing season. And then also really important is that we don't necessarily always get the same temperatures in the winter that would drop down to like -18, -20 and cause damage to those tender varietals. So they become a little more risky in some of the other parts of Ontario because they just are a little less winter hardy. That's, you know, a fact of just their vine itself. So
wow, great. That really puts it into context in terms of where the different sub-appellations are. Now, you've got so many changes have happened this year. What are you looking forward to, or what do you anticipate in 2021? What are you doing more of? What are you doing less of? Or what changes do you expect, or what's your outlook?
Yeah, so we have a pretty positive outlook in the sense that we've been really buoyed by the desire for Ontarians, Canadians to buy local, like we were talking about earlier in the COVID pandemic. So people seeking out VQA wines, knowing that those are 100% local. So that's something that we hope that carries through, not just to next year, but forever, really. Right. I mean, in the long term, that Canadians become very excited about and prideful of their wines. Canadians are often known to not be a sort of a proud type, and we're a little bit more, shy and to not stand up for ourselves. So we want Canadians to be like with the Olympics, that was really exciting when we were like, hey, yeah, we are Canadian. We the North.
Yay.
To have that moment with a Canadian wine, to really be excited and proud of it. We have one of the most exceptional grape growing regions in the world. It's true. We should be really excited about it. And amazing wines, great people to meet. You can visit and get to know winemakers like Klaus or Herbert Conselman or Paul Boss. There's so many great people in the community, pioneers and new up and coming winemakers. It's a really exciting place to be.
It is. It reminds me, Andrea, of I call it the Shania Twain or Celine Dion syndrome. They need to go make it big somewhere else, and then we embrace with it. But now we've got big publications like the Wall Street Journal and others saying, this is the undiscovered gem right here in Ontario. The wines here are remarkable. So maybe now we'll truly embrace, and hopefully, this whole COVID thing has been a good thing in a way, in that you are developing more direct relationships with customers and this stronger sales channel, if you will, and not so dependent on other means.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I do think that in terms of what's to come, certainly, I think a lot of the experiences we've created through COVID will remain, in terms of what we'll offer in the years to come by reservation, really taking that time to engage and connect with consumers. So we can share these stories, and we can share about the people, about the wines. And you're right. I mean, sometimes it does take someone else to tell Canadians. I mean, it's not just Canadians though either. I remember I met Kim Crawford's wife, and she spoke at a conference, and she was telling us about how she built her business. And it was really interesting to know. Number one, it was a virtual winery. I never knew that. I was like, oh, what? Yeah. So they were having their wine made elsewhere for many, many years. And the reason they became so successful in the US and in Canada was because they could not sell their wine in New Zealand.
Wow.
So
that sounds very familiar.
A little familiar, yeah.
Wow.
So it wasn't until they received some international awards for their wine, plugged in through the US and Canada, and voila, there you go. Now, it's like one iconic New Zealand brand that they're so proud of. And so it was such an interesting story to hear her tell, that it was very similar to the Canadian story in my mind. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Good comparison. Oh my gosh, this has been terrific. Is there anything that you wanted to mention that we haven't? I'll definitely include a link as to where people can get can buy the wines directly from you online from all of those wineries.
Thank
Taste the
you.
season at home for sure, and a link, of course, to your website. But is there anything else you wanted to mention as we wrap up?
Yeah, I think I just want to finish with the, I really can't talk more enough about my passion for local. That's something that was really instilled in me. Talk about the influence of my dad. I think I have to definitely sort of come full circle and bring it back to him. In the video that I was talking about earlier with him in the 70s, he demanded that people drink his wine because it was good, not because it was Canadian. And he wanted you to drink it because you liked it. And he would never use any kind of other appellation terminology, call his wine a Chablis or a Champagne or a Bordeaux or a Beaujolais, because he was like, no, those are places in another country. We're in Canada. I'm making wines from Canadian grapes, and I want you to drink them. Yes, it's great to drink them because they're Canadian. And there is an incredible economic impact that we need to think about in these COVID times. A bottle of VQA wine contributes approximately $100 of an economic positive spin-off to the local economy versus less than 10 for an import.
Wow.
So, dramatic difference. But at the end of the day, while he, of course, always loved local, loved, doing what he was doing because it was authentic, he wanted you to drink the wine because it tasted good. Mm-hmm. And, the wines are delicious. And so you can drink great wines, and you can also support your local neighbors. So it's a great story, and it's a great thing that we can all be part of, as Ontarians, not just with wine, but with everything that we choose, whether it's, local strawberries that are now being grown in greenhouse as opposed to imported. It's a really important thing we can do for our fellow Canadians, really. Absolutely. At this point in time.
And I've said this before, but really wine is the only thing I can think of where we put it on the dinner table in its original package. We don't keep stickers on the oranges or the apples. We don't put the cart of strawberries there so you can see what farmyard they came from. But wine, it's a billboard, and it sits on the table amidst all the other food. And I think that speaks to how important the story is, how important the origin is, and just how our connection to wine is very much, I don't know, it's so deeply rooted, excuse the pun, but also it has so much value add as an agricultural product. It's there with its packaging because it's a complete package and story.
Forget, there is that grape. And when I came on to work here and be part of the Rife team, the philosophy that Klaus always had was that great wine start in the vineyard, and he's a farmer first. And sometimes we forget that with winemakers because we have that manufacturing side, but we are farmers first, and we have a great agricultural base here that's really like any other part of Ontario. I mean, it's a specialty tender fruit crop area that's been preserved as a green belt, which is amazing for generations to come. And so supporting it, feels good, and drinking wine
it tastes good. Even more important, you feel good, it tastes good. The two things.
And I love that you called and talked about it being a food. It's it's a part of a meal. So
it is. It's a liquid condiment. I choose my wine first and then the food. Let's get the priorities straight, people. But I also choose earrings first, then the outfit. So I don't know. Maybe that's just weird. Andrea, this has been absolutely delightful. Thank you so much for joining me here. And I can't wait to get this out on the podcast. We'll also publish this throughout the social media channels and post your links so that everybody can get together and support local and show their pride in their glass, or however you put it. Fantastic. Taste the season at home with Niagara-on-the-Lake Wineries. Thank you, Andrea.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. So good to see you, Natalie.
So good to see you too. Bye for now.
Take care. Bye-bye.